A girl named Melissa Young came home, unpacked her grocery bags and ate a piece of her favorite chocolate. Then upon hearing some strange noises, Melissa went up to the attic to check, asking if anyone was there. Suddenly the light went out. Some time later, a young couple, Michael Jensen and Vidya Khan, moved into this 5-apartment building. Vidya, who was pregnant, noticed that the ceiling was leaking and went upstairs to check. She knocked on the door but no one answered. Michael, busy moving furniture, advised his girlfriend to knock on another apartment. Their neighbor, Kieran Moss, told her that the upstairs apartment had been vacant for quite some time. Vidya asked who might have the key to that apartment. Kieran replied that Joe might have access, but he was probably not home yet, as the workday was not over. Joe really wasn't there. Kieran also had to leave. Clearly they would still have to get into the upstairs apartment because the ceiling kept leaking. Michael picked the lock and decided to start his inspection from the attic. Everything indicated that no one had lived there for a long time. As Michael tried to lower the attic ladder, Vidya noticed a photograph of a middle-aged woman. Vidya decided to climb up as well, but Michael, looking concerned and frightened, told her to go back down. In the attic there was a body belonging to a person who had clearly been dead for over a year. The police and forensic team arrived at the scene. Detectives Len Harper and Alice Yap would be investigating the case. Helen, who was in charge of the crime scene, said that the neighbors had stumbled upon mummified remains while trying to locate the source of the ceiling leak. At first glance the death occurred between 2 and 5 years ago. There were no signs of struggle. However, it also didn't look like a heart attack. The exact cause still had to be determined. Len Harper examined the apartment. Vidya offered to help clean up. Naturally she was disturbed by the whole situation, as they had just moved in and were hoping to start their family life here. Due to excess weight, it was difficult to determine from the photograph how old the victim might have been. All the residents of the 5-apartment building, including Peggy Scott, were deeply unsettled by the events. Detective Harper began questioning the neighbors, starting with Elaine Markham, who had lived there for 4 years. When asked whether anyone had lived in the 5th apartment during that time, Elaine replied that there had been a girl named Melissa, who had disappeared about 2 years ago. Perhaps she had simply moved out. Alice Yap suggested that the victim had gone up to the attic for some reason, fallen and suffered a head injury. Since the attic was cold in winter, the neighbors hadn't noticed any smell. Most likely this was Melissa Young, who hadn't been seen in the past 2 years. The address of that apartment was the last known place she had lived. Detective Harper continued questioning the neighbors. A teenager, Adam Moss, behaved insolently, but the detective ignored it and asked the young man to give his business card to the parents when they got home from work. Upon learning that a body had been found in the attic, Adam became instantly interested. So far the police had no answer as to whether it was a crime or an accident. It was strange that for more than 2 years, no one had reported Melissa missing. Could it be that no one had noticed she was gone? Kieran Moss, a journalist, heard from a colleague that remains had been found in a 5-apartment building in their town. Realizing that it was his own building, Kieran was shocked. When Joe Sellers, a math teacher at St. John's School, returned home from work, he saw Detective Harper's business card on his apartment door. Elaine, coming down the stairs, made a snide remark about the police discovering his dirty secret. For some reason Elaine was certain that Joe was the one who had hidden the body in the attic. It was known that Melissa Young was born in June 1980, and the apartment had been inherited from her mother. She hadn't worked since 2005, had no siblings, and her only living relative was a cousin who lived far away. It all sounded like Melissa had been very lonely. However, Len Harper still found it odd that no one had noticed her disappearance. There was no evidence that this was a crime. Given how much time had passed, it would be extremely difficult for the medical examiner to determine the exact cause of death. Kieran came home late. The horrifying discovery in the attic continued to occupy his thoughts, and he decided to go up there. Power outages were common in this place. Joe also went up, telling Kieran that he had sometimes wondered where Melissa could have disappeared. Kieran mentioned the new tenants. Elaine, who lived with Peggy, was worried that she was late and left her a voicemail asking her to call back. Michael was not happy with their new home with Vidya. Everything here was rotten, and nothing worked. The move had been just as difficult for Vidya, and on top of that, she was preparing to become a mother. Joe was deep in thought. He certainly did not seem like someone capable of harming anyone. Kieran flinched when his girlfriend and colleague Patricia playfully scared him. Later, they discussed the attic incident. Patricia guessed that Kieran did not want to publish an article about it because he was afraid that once the news went public, the value of all the apartments in the building would drop significantly, and they were planning to move out. Vidya could not sleep that night. This was not how she had imagined their new home. When Elaine woke up in the morning, she did not find her beloved beside her. Joe Sellers did not wait for the detective's visit and went to the police station himself. He had been living in that house for 15 years and had known Melissa's mother, Mary. However, Joe claimed that he was not closely acquainted with Melissa herself. He was unmarried and lived alone. According to him, Melissa had no friends. Joe did not like her either, and he did not hide it. Due to the significant stage of decomposition, the forensic expert was unable to determine the exact cause of death. There were no visible injuries or bullet wounds. The only known fact was that Melissa had been taking medication for anxiety. If no instrument of crime was found, the coroner would not be able to provide a definitive answer. Michael Jensen greeted Joe, who as it turned out had taught him math in middle school. Michael did not like his former teacher and made it clear that he would not let him live peacefully. Then Michael turned it into a joke, saying that they would see each other again. Joe lied to the detective. In reality, he did not live alone but with a woman. House number 8 was full of mysteries. Len Harper told his colleagues that he did not believe Melissa's death was an accident. But his colleagues disagreed, reminding Harper that he was retiring tomorrow, so someone else would be taking over the case. Nevertheless, Len Harper decided to speak with Kieran once more, who told him that he had moved into this house in 2010. After his divorce, he was looking for a 2-bedroom apartment for himself and his son Adam. Kieran had rarely seen Melissa. She was shy and did not have a boyfriend. As the detective was leaving, he crossed paths with Vidya. Harper had a duplicate key to Melissa's apartment, and he offered to go there with Vidya. The detective found it strange that the young woman did not have a computer in her home. Melissa's phone was also missing, making it difficult to track down any acquaintances. Vidya gave the detective the contact details of the previous owner of her and Michael's house, Richard Webb, who now lived in Canada. Perhaps this could help. When asked about his family, Harper told Vidya that he had no children and that his wife had passed away last year. He had one more request for Vidya: to shout help from the attic. The acoustics were excellent there, which meant that if Melissa had called for help, someone would have surely heard her. Perhaps it really was an accident. With a heavy heart, Harper turned in his police badge. His colleagues threw him a farewell party and gave him a gift, a bow and arrows. They also paid for archery lessons, so now he had no excuse. Later, Harper asked Alice Yap to promise that she would not drop Melissa's case. Someone had harmed this lonely woman and remained unpunished. The next morning, Harper remembered the contact details of Richard Webb that he had received from Vidya. Michael noticed a young woman in Joe's apartment window, someone he had never seen among the neighbors before. This could not help but alarm him. Finding a photograph from his high school graduation, Michael realized that the young woman Liz Fletcher had been in his class as well. Harper visited his terminally ill brother Jerry, who had also been a detective in the hospital. Waiting in the hospital corridor was Alex, Harper's nephew. The former detective asked the young man why a person might not have a personal profile on social media. Alex suggested that it could be due to data protection, a desire for anonymity, or simply a lack of friends. For some reason, Joe doesn't want the neighbors to know that he doesn't live alone. Elaine finds it unbearable that Peggy is ignoring her and not even answering her calls. Hearing someone sobbing, Vidya stepped out of her apartment. The acoustics here really were very good. The next morning, Harper met with Alice to give her Richard Webb's contact information, but it turned out that the case had already been transferred to another department. It was unlikely that anyone would care about Melissa's fate anymore. But not Harper. He contacted Richard Webb via Skype and asked about Melissa Young. The news of Melissa's death clearly came as a shock to Richard. When asked whether any of the tenants could access the attic, Richard replied no, because Joe always put a stop to it, often in a rather demanding manner. Moreover, Richard described most of the building's residents as extremely unfriendly. Melissa, on the other hand, was polite but very reserved. She didn't interact with people much. After greeting Vidya, Harper returned to Melissa's apartment, hoping to find at least some clues and piece together what had happened. In the past, when Melissa had first moved in, she quickly met Richard, who immediately recognized that she was Mary's daughter. Melissa had expected to stay only briefly, but her mother was seriously ill. Joe had held Mary's hand. Harper wasn't sure what he was looking for in Melissa's apartment. Suddenly someone attacked him from behind. Harper chased after this person but lost consciousness due to a head injury. In the past, as Melissa was watching cute cat videos on her laptop, there was a knock on the door. It was Elaine and Peggy, offering her a photo shoot. But Melissa was too shy. Popping open a bottle of wine, Elaine said time was running out and that they urgently needed to find someone. Eventually Melissa agreed. It was a rather revealing photo shoot. Vidya helped Harper, who due to his injury could barely remember the recent events. He wasn't even sure if there had really been someone in Melissa's apartment. Vidya realized that the former detective didn't believe Melissa's death was an accident. When Joe came home, Liz was crying, saying that the police officer had come again while she had been in apartment 5. Joe reminded her of their agreement. She wasn't supposed to go upstairs. Through her tears, Liz admitted that she had hit the officer and run away. He probably hadn't gotten a good look at her. Elaine still couldn't reach Peggy. Because of this, they had missed out on a contract. Soon Peggy finally showed up. The two women went to a cafe and discussed the new tenant's discovery in the attic. Peggy said she couldn't stay in that house any longer. Though in reality it wasn't about the house, it was about Elaine. Peggy intended to collect her things and break up with Elaine. Harper started attending the archery classes his colleagues had gifted him. Michael realized that some of the building's residents had something to hide. Finally, he personally met Kieran. Meanwhile, Kieran's son, Adam, was spending time in the apartment with his girlfriend. Once again, Harper visited house number 8. Vidya assisted him in everything, fearing that one of the residents might be involved in the case. Harper re-examined the potential crime scene and found a magazine featuring a revealing photo of Melissa. Patricia came to Kieran's apartment, but he wasn't home. Adam had never seen his father's girlfriend before. Harper was sure that Melissa had been pressured into the photo shoot. She didn't look relaxed in the pictures. Vidya agreed with his assessment. Patricia admitted to Adam that she had been dating his father for a year. They had been keeping their relationship a secret, and on top of that, were colleagues. Vidya suggested to Michael that they throw a housewarming party to get to know the neighbors better. Meanwhile, Harper continued keeping an eye on the building. In the morning, Michael, acting overly friendly, invited Joe Sellers to the housewarming party, hinting that he could bring someone along. Harper contacted the publication that owned the magazine. The director explained that the material wasn't theirs. They usually work with private clients as contractors. It seemed that the issue had been rejected and never went to print. Harper asked the director to find out who the photographer was. It turned out to be Elaine, and the former detective immediately spoke with her. Harper remembered that the last time they talked, Elaine had claimed she barely knew Melissa. Elaine said it was. She and Peggy had just thought that using a plus-size model might help them secure a contract, so they convinced Melissa to participate in the photo shoot. However, the idea turned out to be too radical for the magazine, which preferred models with conventional proportions. After that, they never even thought about Melissa again. Harper wanted to speak with Peggy as well, but Elaine said Peggy wouldn't be back until the weekend. Adam called Patricia at work, telling her she hadn't left his thoughts and suggesting they meet to discuss something. Patricia replied that it probably wasn't a good idea. Harper visited his gravely ill brother in the hospital again, telling him he had gone back to that apartment. Jerry, whose face was permanently covered by an oxygen mask, couldn't speak but he could write, and he advised Len to stop. But Harper felt responsible. Melissa deserved justice. He wasn't the only one who couldn't stop thinking about it. Unable to sleep, Vidya entered Melissa's apartment in the middle of the night and took one of her photographs. In the past, Melissa had asked Elaine not to publish the photos. Under normal circumstances, she never would have agreed to the shoot, but that evening she had drunk too much wine. Elaine told her it was too late and slammed the door in her face. After scanning Melissa's photograph, Vidya created a Facebook profile for her. Noticing that his neighbor Frank's car wouldn't start, Len offered to help. Frank had lived here for 9 years, yet Len had only just learned his name. Joe was getting ready for work as usual. Michael watched Mr. Sellers through the window. Joe suspected nothing for now, while Michael continued his surveillance, convinced that the schoolteacher had something to hide. Climbing over the school fence, Michael snuck inside and rummaged through Mr. Sellers' locker, stealing the key to his apartment. He was spotted and took off running. Peggy was determined to break up with Elaine and came to collect her things. Elaine immediately left Harper a voicemail, letting him know Peggy had arrived. Naturally, this made Peggy nervous. Harper, who was helping his neighbor fix the car, suggested they have some whiskey together in the evening. Frank eagerly agreed. Michael broke into Joe's apartment, which was connected to the basement. Everything indicated that a woman was living there. Liz hid, then seizing the moment attacked Michael. Trying to calm her down, he told her they had been in the same class 10 years ago. Liz looked very frightened. Peggy was packing her things when suddenly the doorbell rang. Michael remembered that Liz used to date his friend Gus, who was now serving a 20-year sentence in prison. Michael himself had once been a troublemaker too, but he had settled down. Now he worked in a shoe store and was preparing to become a father. Though Michael no longer kept in touch with any of his old school friends or teachers, he still remembered how Joe Sellers had tormented him for no reason. And he certainly hadn't expected to find his former classmate Liz Fletcher in Joe's house. Liz asked Michael to leave before Joe returned. Michael didn't understand why she was so afraid of Sellers, or just as importantly what she was doing in his apartment. Although Harper was no longer on duty, Peggy agreed to talk to him. That photoshoot didn't align at all with the image of the modest, reserved Melissa. Peggy assured him that Melissa had been fully aware of how the photos would be used and had simply wanted to help her neighbors. Harper had no doubt about that, based on what others said, Melissa had been incapable of saying no. Elaine interjected, stating that no one truly knew what Melissa had been like. Everyone tends to pretend. In the past, Elaine and Peggy began threatening Melissa, who had sued them for using her photos. Richard witnessed one of these threats. In the present, Michael is trying to process what he saw in Sellers' apartment. Joe learned from his colleague about a suspicious guy spotted at school today. Joe immediately became anxious and started frantically searching for his keys. Finding them in his car, he felt relieved. It seemed he had just forgotten them there. Patricia told Kieran about a housewarming party their new neighbors were throwing. Kieran had no desire to go, but Patricia insisted. Upon returning home, Joe's first question to Liz was whether everything was okay. While making dinner, Liz replied that everything was fine. Vidya and Michael were preparing to receive guests in their apartment, while Harper was having dinner alone. Elaine told the new neighbors that the house's previous owner, Richard, had been a typical bookworm. But Vidya was more concerned about Melissa. Peggy mentioned that Melissa had been unremarkable. Elaine made an inappropriate joke, saying Melissa had been unremarkable until she started walking around the apartment because she had the grace of an elephant. Kieran and Patricia joined the party, as did Mr. Sellers. Michael never missed an opportunity to make a biting remark about Joe. While Harper was deep in thought, Patricia advised Vidya to stay away from Elaine and her girlfriend. Those were not the kind of people worth befriending. When Vidya mentioned that Detective Harper dropped by every day, Patricia claimed it was just for show. She was convinced that neither the public nor the police cared about Melissa's fate. Feeling lonely, Harper decided to get drunk. Kieran politely declined alcohol, citing work the next day. Vidya asked Joe Sellers what Michael had been like in school. Joe said that Michael had been a troubled teenager. Michael was clearly alarmed by Vidya's interaction with his former teacher. After the party, Patricia told Kieran that Vidya and Michael made a cute couple. Kieran thought they were too young to become parents. Since Adam was supposed to spend the night elsewhere, Kieran brought Patricia to his apartment, but Adam unexpectedly returned. Or maybe he did it on purpose. Kieran had to introduce Patricia to his son. The situation became awkward. Joe didn't go to bed until Liz had fallen asleep. Peggy stayed at Elaine's apartment, though she clearly regretted it. The past wouldn't let her go. Peggy remembered approaching Melissa and handing her all the copies of the magazine. She also assured her that she had deleted the photos. Melissa thanked her neighbor, who regretted that it had come to this. Peggy hadn't wanted any conflicts. Clearly she hadn't told Elaine anything. While helping Melissa carry some things to the attic, Richard told her never to let anyone treat her poorly. Richard tried to kiss Melissa, but she pulled away. That night, Vidya received a friend request on Melissa's Facebook profile. Harper was woken up by a phone call. A male voice said that she was better off dead. No one knew that Melissa and Kieran had been secretly seeing each other. He had told her how much he liked her. In the present, Adam introduced his father and Patricia to his girlfriend, Piri. Kieran refused the wine. Piri guessed that he had been an alcoholic in the past. After dinner, as Kieran drove Piri home, Adam hinted to Patricia that he wouldn't mind dating an older woman. Patricia was caught off guard. Harper continued attending archery classes. A woman asked him whose face he saw instead of the target. She, for example, imagined her ex-husband. Hearing footsteps in the apartment upstairs, Vidya went to check what was going on and saw someone running down the stairs. Returning from her morning jog, Patricia asked what had happened. Vidya suggested she take a look at something. An offensive word had been written on Melissa's apartment wall. Vidya was about to call Harper. Patricia told Kieran about what had happened. She felt uneasy knowing that all of Melissa's belongings remained in place, as if she had simply stepped out to the store. Patricia wanted to write an article about Melissa, but Kieran talked her out of it, arguing that no one would be interested in reading about a woman whose death had gone unnoticed. After receiving a call from Vidya, Harper arrived. Nothing was missing from Melissa's apartment, so it did not appear to be a burglary. Vidya told Harper that she had created a Facebook profile under Melissa's name to see if anyone would try to contact her. Someone named Yvette Parks had sent a friend request. Harper suggested sending Yvette a message from Melissa's account, asking to meet. Elaine was used to controlling Peggy's every move, not wanting her to leave the apartment alone. Yvette, believing she was messaging Melissa, replied and agreed to meet the next day. Later, Harper visited his brother in the hospital again. He felt like he was missing something, unable to let the case go. While Joe was out, Liz allowed Michael into the apartment. Today she even cooked for him. Harper and Vidya waited for Yvette at the agreed meeting place, a cafe. Soon Yvette arrived. Kieran did not expect his son to show up at his office. Adam said he just had a couple of free hours. In reality, it was just an excuse to see Patricia. In the past, Melissa had desperately tried to lose weight, all to make herself even more attractive to Kieran. One day he introduced her to his son Adam, but did not mention that they were dating. However, Adam figured it out anyway. Yvette was shocked to learn of Melissa's passing. They had once attended a weight loss group together. Yvette knew that at some point, Melissa had started dating an older man. She had no further details, but for Harper this could be a lead. Joe was surprised that they had run out of bacon so quickly. Liz said the bacon had expired, so she threw it away. Michael could not stop harboring resentment toward Joe, who had constantly given him bad grades in school. Harper and Vidya found no men's belongings in Melissa's apartment, meaning there was no proof she had a boyfriend. Additionally, the neighbors had not seen any visitors at her place. Vidya suggested that Melissa's lover might have been one of the neighbors. Vidya's boyfriend was already waiting for her, so she wished Harper good night and left. He continued searching and found a note that said sorry from a flower shop. After doing her makeup, Peggy was getting ready to go out, which angered Elaine, who was feeling unwell. Elaine wanted attention and care. Patricia was growing increasingly wary of Adam's behavior, as he seemed almost obsessed with her. Harper fell asleep right in Melissa's apartment and was awakened by a knock at the door. Vidya had brought him coffee. Harper showed her the note. Someone had a reason to send Melissa flowers. After receiving a call from Marie, his brother's wife, Harper immediately went to the hospital. Marie and Alex were already there. Jerry did not have much time left, so he was glad to have his closest family around him in his final hours. Joe found it odd that Liz had suddenly decided to put on makeup. Every morning when Joe left for work, Michael visited Liz. She had been the most beautiful girl in school. Now Michael just wanted Liz to trust him and tell him what had happened to her. Liz revealed that 5 years ago, she had gotten into trouble and had nowhere else to go. According to Liz, she could leave whenever she wanted, but it was not safe. Michael was late for work and had to go. Liz wanted to kiss him, but he pulled away. As he was leaving, Michael ran into Kieran and suggested going to the pub later to chat. Patricia as always returned from her morning run. Adam continued to flirt with her persistently. Patricia found it extremely unpleasant. Upon learning that Harper's brother had passed away that morning, Alice offered her condolences. They drank together, reminiscing about Jerry. To Harper, his older brother had always been a role model. Michael was irritated by the mere existence of Sellers. But Vidya believed that Mr. Sellers simply wanted to inspire Michael to try harder. Michael objected, saying that the teacher had turned his school years into a nightmare. Patricia felt uncomfortable being in the same space as Adam, so she asked Kieran not to go to the pub with Michael. She even had to reveal the true reason for her concern. But Kieran objected, claiming that Adam was a good guy and that Patricia was just being paranoid. Michael shared with Kieran that Vidya had started seeing herself as a detective and was spending all day in Melissa's apartment, searching for clues. Kieran said that all pregnant women act strangely. For Michael, a future father, the real challenges were only just beginning. Adam searched the entire apartment for Patricia, who had decided to hide at Vidya's place. Knowing that Kieran as a journalist often dealt with crime stories, Michael casually mentioned that a girl from his class had gone missing several years ago. Kieran said he still had contacts in the police force and offered to help Michael as a neighborly favor. Michael asked Kieran why he didn't drink at all. After some hesitation, Kieran finally had a drink. Meanwhile, the women discussed Melissa's case, which the police seemingly had no interest in. Vidya was eager to find out who Melissa's mysterious boyfriend had been. Patricia said she could go to the flower shop and try to find something out. Kieran showed up late at night extremely drunk, and became very aggressive toward Patricia. Then he turned his attention to Adam. Taking advantage of the situation, Patricia locked herself in the bedroom. When Kieran woke up with a terrible hangover in the morning, Patricia was already packing her things. Kieran said that last night wasn't the real him. But that didn't convince Patricia. She no longer wanted to see him. A secret affair developed between Liz and Michael. Patricia went to that same flower shop and after paying the owner, asked for the name of the person who had sent the note. After years of sobriety, Kieran had started drinking heavily again. While Vidya was returning home with groceries, she suddenly felt contractions and called for help. Liz heard the neighbors' cries. Michael, who was at work, was informed that his wife was in labor, and he immediately rushed to her. But it turned out to be a false alarm. It was Liz who had helped Vidya. Liz introduced herself as Joe's nurse. To distract himself, Harper continued attending archery classes. Suddenly he received a phone call that made him anxious. Elaine wouldn't let Peggy leave the house, suspecting that she had someone else. Sometimes Peggy was frightened by her girlfriend's excessive control. Vidya and Patricia informed Harper that Kieran had been the one who sent flowers to Melissa. He thanked the women for their help. Finding a receipt for takeout coffee in the trash, Joe realized that Liz had been seeing someone. And that someone was Michael. Harper asked Kieran to explain the apology note to Melissa. Kieran stated that after his divorce, he had been going through a rough time, so he got into a short-term, no-strings-attached relationship with his neighbor. But Melissa thought it was serious, and she ended up disappointed. The bouquet was his way of apologizing. Harper didn't believe in Kieran's sincerity because Kieran didn't care about Melissa's disappearance. After the former detective left, Kieran kept drinking. In the past, when Melissa was returning home late after a run, Adam blocked her way, saying she wouldn't get inside without a password. Melissa threatened to complain to Adam's father, but the young man wasn't intimidated. He knew his father was as always drunk and wouldn't even look twice at someone like Melissa if he were sober. This disgraceful scene was interrupted by Kieran's appearance. In the present, Adam ran into Harper and openly insulted Melissa, saying the police should be looking for multiple criminals because no one could have carried her to the attic alone. The former detective decided to teach the teenager a lesson. At home, drunk Kieran directly asked his son if he had harmed Melissa. This question infuriated Adam. In the past, Melissa sat across from Kieran's apologetic bouquet, eating a lot. Harper was determined to get justice for Melissa. He was one of the few who still cared. While Harper was in Melissa's apartment, he had no idea that Liz was watching him. In the past, Melissa, wearing a beautiful dress and makeup, knocked on Richard's door, asking if he would like to accompany her to the upcoming Christmas party for the building's residents. But Richard already had a date. Melissa felt extremely lonely. She didn't even have anyone to talk to. Joe was the only one not taking part in the general merriment. The loud music irritated him, but no one cared. In the restroom, Melissa and Peggy ran into each other and talked briefly. Melissa would be spending Christmas alone, while Peggy wished she could celebrate with her family, but Elaine was against it. Peggy also secretly told Melissa that she was looking for an apartment behind Elaine's back. Later, Melissa saw Liz. Melissa's house was up for sale. Joe joked that no matter what, no new neighbors could be worse than the current ones. Elaine continued to control Peggy's every step, despite the fact that Peggy had spoken about wanting to break up. Vidya was setting up the nursery, preparing for the baby's arrival, unaware that every morning before work, Michael was stopping by Liz's place where they indulged in passion. Alice told Harper that the jury had not classified Melissa's case as a crime. It seemed that Harper was the only one who didn't consider it an accident. Even the medical examiner was uncertain. Harper was deeply disappointed in Alice, who hadn't taken the case seriously enough. Later, Harper visited the grave of his late wife, Jean. There, he spotted Joe and decided to follow him. Why was Joe visiting the grave of Mary Young, Melissa's mother? Harper tried to piece everything together. Someone in the building definitely knew more than they were saying. Harper's instincts as a professional guided him. So far, Joe's seller seemed the most suspicious. He bought something for Liz, a new dress. She thanked him for the gift, but the dress was slightly too big. Joe promised to get another one and gave Liz something else, a pendant of his close friend. While movers continued clearing out Melissa's apartment, Harper visited Vidya again, asking at which school Joe Sellers taught. Vidya replied that it was St. John's School. Meanwhile, tensions between Peggy and Elaine kept escalating. Harper asked Joe why he disliked Melissa. Joe replied that it was just for no reason. Yet at the same time, Joe had been friends with Melissa's mother, Mary, and even took care of her when she was sick. Elaine didn't even allow Peggy to go to a cafe alone. Harper decided to dig through the dumpsters of house number 8, hoping to find clues. Michael asked Harper to stop bothering Vidya, who was due to give birth any day now, but the ex-detective refused to back down and rummaged through the belongings the movers had discarded from Melissa's home. Kieran began to doubt whether he truly knew his son and suggested they live apart for a while. Kieran definitely didn't like what Adam was turning into. In Adam, he saw the worst traits of himself. What if Adam was the one who hurt Melissa? Joe returned claiming he had forgotten some books, and caught Liz with Michael, who sneered at his former teacher, saying they were now even. All day Joe couldn't focus on his lessons, replaying in his mind the moment he had entered Melissa's apartment. The jewelry box with her mother's gold pieces was still there. Climbing up to the attic, Joe discovered Melissa's body. To this day, Joe's students called him unhinged. Rumors spread that he had an unhealthy interest in some of them. Kieran wanted Patricia to write a truthful and respectful article about Melissa Young in the hope that the public would respond and help piece together the details of her demise. Kieran fully understood that he might not come out looking great in that article. All day Joe was on edge. The police arrived at the school to arrest him for attacking a student with his cane. At that moment, Joe confessed that he was the one who had taken Melissa's life. When Peggy tried to harm herself, Elaine didn't even attempt to stop her, knowing she wouldn't have the courage to go through with it. While Liz continued to secretly observe everything, Harper kept searching for clues. Alice arrived to inform him of Joe Sellers' arrest. Harper had been right all along. According to Joe, he had argued with Melissa about something, and rage consumed him. In the morning, realizing Joe was missing, Liz became worried and decided to help Vidya with the nursery setup. Now Liz introduced herself as Joe's niece. Harper interrupted the women's conversation. When he asked Liz if she had known Melissa, she replied that she hadn't. She was still unaware of Joe's arrest. Peggy is kept tied up by Elaine to prevent her from doing anything reckless again. Searching Joe's apartment, Harper found many women's belongings, as well as Liz's phone and passport. Harper then stopped by the police station to visit his former colleagues. Patricia also arrived, hoping to learn more information. Alice said that Joe continued to insist on his guilt. When she stepped away, Harper took the opportunity to use her computer to look up Elizabeth Fletcher in the database. Kieran, who had previously promised Michael to find out something about Liz Fletcher, came to his workplace and told him that years ago, Liz's mother's boyfriend was found dead. No one had seen Liz since then. When Alice learned from Patricia that Harper had been conducting his own investigation, she became concerned. But Len was no longer at the station. Seeing Liz in a photo from Michael's school prom, Vidya realized that this girl was not who she claimed to be. Alice caught up with Harper on the street, asking how he could act so recklessly. Harper didn't believe that Joe was the one who took Melissa's life. He was certain that Liz was involved, that she had been on the run for a long time, and that Joe was simply taking the blame. Perhaps Vidya's life was now in danger. Liz confessed to Vidya about her secret affair with Michael. Vidya tried to escape but Liz wouldn't allow it, declaring that this house was hers. All the tenants had always left their spare keys with Joe, believing they could trust him. That's how Liz had access to all the apartments. One day Melissa saw Liz, and that made her an obstacle. Calling for backup, Harper and Alice arrived. Fortunately Vidya was unharmed, but Liz had managed to escape. At that moment Harper admitted to Vidya that he was already retired, but his deception had only been for good reasons. The police quickly caught Liz and arrested her. Michael told Vidya that he had only seen Liz as an opportunity to get revenge on Joe by taking away something he loved. It was never about Liz herself. Vidya told Michael that he had never truly grown up and wasn't ready to be a father. Among other things, Liz had stolen Melissa's mother's jewelry for herself. One way or another, Harper had fulfilled his duty. Vidya soon gave birth. Kieran and Patricia, who were back together, greeted her warmly. Vidya, by the way, had a date coming up. Harper offered to watch her daughter. He and Vidya had become good friends. Elaine was waiting for a courier who was supposed to deliver her some ice. Naturally, Harper quickly became suspicious and decided to follow her, only to witness something that shocked him. Sneaking up behind him, Elaine knocked him out. In the past, when Melissa heard strange noises and went up to the attic, someone grabbed her. It was Elaine. Vidya's date went well, but she never expected to go into Elaine's apartment and find Peggy's lifeless body and Harper gravely injured, whispering, "Run." In the past, Elaine had only meant to scare Peggy. When Melissa told Elaine that Peggy had long been planning to leave her, Peggy, desperate to deny it, attacked Melissa, cutting off her oxygen. All Vidya could think about now was saving herself and her daughter. Elaine was already searching for her. In the past, Elaine had convinced Peggy to leave Melissa's body in the attic. No one would look for her anyway. If they ran, they would only bring suspicion upon themselves. Elaine searched for Vidya in the attic. Seizing the moment, Vidya pushed Elaine down. Harper, clinging to life with his last strength, fired an arrow into Elaine. After that, he collapsed, realizing that his time was up. The police arrived. Vidya held her daughter, mourning her friend. He whispered that he didn't want to die alone. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.